Welcome back to another author interview at Crystal Lake. And today our guest is Werner Schmidt, and we'll be discussing his book, Chelsea, Glitter and the Graveyard on the Hill. So I'm going to turn it over to him and let him introduce himself. So take it away.
Anita, thank you so much, and a wonderful privilege to be here. I'm Werner Schmidt. I'm an author, leadership and culture architect, and musician here in South Africa. I work globally and with my leadership and culture architecture work, and also with my stories, and I hope for Chelsea Glitter to travel around the globe into many languages.
Yeah, I think that's the dream of all authors. So give us a quick overview of the book. What's it about?
So, the book is about a family, father, mother, Chelsea, age 13, her baby brother Felix, two darling dogs, um, Bella and Hamlet, traveling to a birthday party on a highway, freak accident, and there's a cliffhanger scene in the first four chapters where they are barrel rolling into the air. They hang like bats in a cave with seat belts, and then the accident happens, and I then follow them. They get ripped in two, literally two humans and a dog, um, pass away to the afterworld, and another two humans and a dog remain in the land of the living. And I'm the GoPro on the shoulder of both these parties. And to my surprise, quite a number of surprises happened when I imagined this reality. How might the afterworld be? And so that broadly speaking is the story. There are two major twists, and I think that's about that uh, at the highest level.
Okay. So tell us about the main characters of the book. What kind of an emotional journey do they go through in the story?
Okay, so this is Chelsea. We meet her as they are barrel rolling, that first moment, and then there are some flashbacks until her 5-year-old self, and this fearless, questioning 5-year-old. It's so wonderful to behold the 5-year-olds in the world. And at 13, she's at this in between phase, this who am I? Why am I here? Who should I be loyal to? Who should I be skeptic towards? And she's the main character in the story. And she has 7 days after that accident. She has 7 days to come to acceptance of the tragedy in terms of the rules in this magical realism world. So the emotional journey starts from denial. I also use some natural elements to amplify the denial, the coming of age, the coming to grips with the tragedy. I use some childhood story that her and her dad made up as story therapy to help her to come to grips. And then at some point, it's a wonderful transition. At some point, she comes of age. She comes to realization of the tragedy that has befell them or befallen them, and she actually has a pretty heroic trajectory towards the end of the story.
Oh, that sounds very interesting. I'm sure readers will love it. So, what types of themes and ideas have you explored in the book?
So I started with, and this maybe asks or aligns in with some of your other questions as well, is the origin of the story. When I was 5 years old, I had a school friend called Victor who passed away. He was electrocuted in the household, very unsafe installation, and it struck this 5-year-old Werner. Um, you can see about 45, 46 years ago, you can still feel it. And I asked my parents, what happens when we die? And I was brought up in a religious household in South Africa, and I was given a very binary answer, almost looking back, a very oversimplified answer. And my first reaction was, if it's like that in the afterworld, I don't want to go. And I was punished for that. So I shut up for about 46 years. And when I started writing the book, so the first theme is Um, I and this is sort of my theory, my hypothesis. I think nothing in this world, nothing in the afterworld is ever boring. Nothing is ever completely sorted out. We never come to full knowledge. There's always more to learn. There are always dangers, adventures, surprises. Um, I just think, and I use some popular music, sparingly, strategically, and legally sound in the book to help us to think about this thing of what if the stages beyond this life are as exciting, as threatening, as surprising, sometimes as tranquil, peaceful. You know, I use Obladi Oblada of the Beatles. What if life does indeed go on, but in another phase or in another stage? So that's a main theme, that nothing's ever boring. Some other themes are family. And, you know, my greatest fear growing up was I don't want to pass away too early. And now that I'm a father and part of a household with two kids and two dogs, it's this thing of what happens when something, a freak accident occurs and we get ripped into. So it's also coming to grips with some of the greatest fears that we might face, um, to get to this place where we integrate, um, where we dance hand in hand with the Grim Reaper every day, to say at any given time it's possible that I can be called to the afterworld, and to let that amplify my living here. There's a moment where one character says, he's called Graham Leaper, he says to his raven, Miss Hugan, he says, yes, miss, I agree. The dead mourn the living more loudly. I wish the living would listen and live more. You know, it's that beautiful flip around of the dead mourning the living for how unamplified, or how limited some of us in the land of the living live our lives. So that's a major theme. You know, make the most of your death, carpe mortalitas, to echo into readers' eyes, to say, okay, if those in the afterworld say this, maybe I can say carpe diem and carpe noctem. Let's grab the night, grab the day. So that's a major theme. Um, then also horror, dangers in the afterworld. I got bored with myself at some point, and some wonderful antagonists, some wonderful villains. Man, I've developed them to such a point. And I love that, the fact that the villains and the heroes, the good people and the bad people are. I can't really choose about who I like the most, who I want to see develop the most. Also in book 2 and 3. So that, broadly speaking, are touches on some of the major themes, very life and death. And I tried to imagine in a curious, creative, sometimes humorous, always empathic way. So never trying to, there are people with very fixed beliefs about what the afterworld looks like. So I tried to embrace and integrate everything I know about in the land of the living, to say, what if this? What if that? What if there are questions? What if there are still mysteries? And what if the centurion stalwarts in the afterworld still don't know everything, and that they themselves haven't even decided to cross over to the so-called other side? So does that give you enough to work with in terms of themes?
I think so. I think they're lovely themes too. So you mentioned one of your inspirations. Were there any other inspirations for the book?
Well, the I've got some. I've got to do a live change of costume. Just give me a moment. So this guy. So I don't know where this came from, but for the longest time, I've been wanting to inspire people as this guy. And I know he looks like a guy with a scythe and a raven on shoulder. And this actually happened in the in the novel where I discovered this character, and I discovered a much more well-rounded character. You know, some people call him the Grim Reaper, but readers might be surprised to know that that's not his or her real name, um, due to certain factors that take place when those in the land of the living transition to the afterworld. So that's been marvelous. And my marketing and my popping in on social media, a lot of that is going to be as that character. And he's got a bit of an Irish accent. For some reason, some Irish came through, and I don't know why, but it's just how it is. So that's a major inspiration. My daughter, there's some autobiographical scenes, particularly at the start, where father figure Thomas Glitter and his daughter Chelsea, when she was 5, um, they were on the carpet Saturday morning, spring air and sunshine through causing the clouds to billow like the sails of a ship on a tranquil ocean, and they played a game, which in my own life also, that very game that they played in the book led some 13, 14 years ago to my first children's play, as I transitioned in my career. And that story never left me. So that story also became the story within the novel that is used to help, particularly Chelsea, to get to grips, to come to acceptance within her 7 days time frame, in terms of these strange rules in this magical realism world that I've created. So that's a major theme. And also, family members, friends, with some regularity in my early years, family members and friends, 3 cousins, 3 close friends, so it's 6, half a dozen, passed away by the age of 19, my age of 19. So it was this heavy burden on me, that, that said, well, why do these characters not go away from my consciousness? And this story is part of me saying, okay, let me imagine the afterworld. Shakespeare is another theme. For some reason, I was recording a song of my second album, which is also almost finished. And in conversation with my recording engineer, brother from another mother, we started bantering about the book I'm working on. And I said, yeah, I feel so Shakespearean, all the world's a stage. And then, oh, but what if all the afterworld is also a stage? And then I went and looked at how Shakespeare, his son Hamnet, aged 11, tragically passed away. His wife Anne Hathaway, her passing away, and that the timelines there. And for some reason, and it was meant to be moment, the architecture of how they passed away exactly fit the architecture that I had devised for the stages in the afterlife. And I said, wow, this is a sign. So I brought in the Shakespeares, and I've written 2 bonus chapters, where I show Shakespeare as graveyard bard, poet, and author, playwright, as he's rewriting the first folio in Stratford Graveyard, and then acting them out with his son Hamnet. So that's a lovely theme also. And I feel like I'm rambling, but I love the world so much. You can see it's wonderful for me to return to this world and these characters.
Yeah, well, we like rambling on this show, so don't worry about it. And it's interesting to see the thought processes, because you never know where inspiration comes, and I like that. So, yeah. So the book is also a bit of a supernatural mystery. So, what is it about the supernatural that appeals to you as a writer?
Well, this is my one word for the year 2026 is integrate. So the whole thing of supernatural and natural, and miraculous and ordinary, and magical and benign or boring, or also ordinary. I'm integrating all these things. So it's, if I was to create a kind of a cap, you are in that part of the world where people love to have caps with their major strives and aims on it. I would say make the supernatural natural again. And that, I think, that is the I riff on that line of land of the living, afterworld. There's a door in a yew tree in the graveyard on the hill, and here and there the door fades in, and above it is a worn plaque which says the other side. So it's integrating these things as I'm attempting to open up my heart to everyone I care about and myself more and more, meaning risking losing them to death and all sorts of other absences and exits. So it's that kind of thing that make the supernatural natural again. Put on your miracle, magical, supernatural lenses in your day and see what it does for your daily practice. It's been wonderful for me through all the trials and tribulations of my life.
Yeah, I think the world could use a little more magic in it and a little more less boring.
I
So,
agree.
so what's your favorite scene, without spoilers, in the book?
Looking for a bit more fantasy in your life? Something with magic, mystery, and a graveyard that won't let you leave. 7 days after the crash, 13-year-old Chelsea Glitter stands in a graveyard staring at the moon. She cannot leave. This is not a great sign. Chelsea Glitter and the Graveyard on the Hill by Werner Schmidt is a young adult magical realism novel about grief, identity, and what happens when the line between life, death, and everything in between begins to dissolve. The fog keeps finding her. The gargoyle keeps moving. A door in a yew tree fades in and out. And the Grim Reaper, well, he has opinions. For fans of the Graveyard Book, The Book Thief, and anyone who has ever stood somewhere and sensed they probably shouldn't be there. Chelsea Glitter and the Graveyard on the Hill by Werner Schmidt.
Favorite scene without Yana, and there's a very major spoiler risk that I want to stay away from. However, I must say that the scene where there's a scene where I spoke earlier of Chelsea starting at a 13-year-old self, and of course nobody knows which part of Land of the Living or Afterworld she lands up in at first, and there's a great deal of denial, a great deal of shock, a great deal of almost want to say amnesia setting in, and not only does she gradually through all these mechanisms and nature playing its role and the childhood story helping her to get to grips of the realities of life and death, with all sorts of other elements, some magical things happening in the graveyard, all these shifts and static characters, making little movements and, are you alive? Are you winking at me? That kind of thing. Eventually, she not only comes to grip with the depth, so that beautiful thing. Many people I experience when this kind of thing happens in families, they find ways to completely jump over it. So at some point, she not only accepts the total reality of what's happened and goes through it, in other words, process it fully, which is so healthy for us, but she comes to actually there's an accelerated trajectory to get her to a very heroic place, where at some point she really turns the tides on some really antagonistic forces, which I think that moment, to see, wow, I'm so proud of her that she came from this fuzzed out, surrounded by fog kind of amnesiac, to this place where she's actually assertive and to the point, and really puts a dent in some heavy antagonistic forces. I think that would be that culmination. For now, I might change my mind, but in the moment, that is favorite moment for me.
Yeah, it sounds like a great scene. So, did you have any difficulties when you were writing the book? Did any part of the plot or character give you any trouble?
Indeed, I knew the start of the story, I knew the end of the story, and then on the way to devise something where there's not a boring middle, I must say it became boring to me. And then we went on a hiking trip, 1,000 kilometers. Where is that? About 700 miles. I don't know. Let's just do kilometers and miles, because there's a number of US readers that are also reading the book as we speak. So we went on a hiking trip, and lo and behold, our guest house before and after the hiking trip was next to this 200 years old graveyard. And I must say, just, oh my word, that's not boring. And I moseyed on over the street, and I started walking and reading epitaphs and so on. And that was a major moment that helped me to say, okay, but bring in a graveyard. And it was a graveyard on a hill. There's another moment when the character with the hoodie and the eye patch and the scythe and the raven, he was already in the scene in the graveyard. But then I thought, if I keep you here much longer, it's just going to be so boring. So all of a sudden he jumped up and he grabbed his scythe, his raven with him, and they went in the so-called gravemobile. They went to the city to run errands, and that opened up a whole new world. So yes, that was difficult. And then so when I overcame that, and I said, okay, now this is interesting, going into the inner city from the graveyard to run errands, which you can find out for yourself if you want to read the book. And then it became an issue of we can't just need people who are cheerleading for Chelsea and pro Chelsea. And so then the birth of and that was such a random moment in the last decade and a half or so, with the phenomenon of creepypasta, which has come and gone, but for some reason just stayed with me. There was a wonderful video game which also came and gone, with some hectic piano playing, called UN Owen Was Her. Fragments like that just remained from just me being a curious human being, seeing what's out there in the last decade and a half or so. And that informed a lot of what, as I said just now, the deliciousness of this gang of what has become the creepypastafarians in the inner city. And they are this afterworldly, in between worlds, but seated in the afterworld kind of crime lords. But their leader, Lady Gula, is she's such a fantastic character. But so that was the last major hurdle, to say, just get antagonists, villains that you like enough. And I must say, I'm very pleased with how much they've developed and how much I care about them. So that, I think that those were the major obstacles. And then also not to, as I wrote, I saw, oh my word, if my goals with this book, as I hit my goals with this book in terms of sales, book 2 and book 3 has already been plotted. That maybe also answers some of your future questions. But also, that was another difficulty, was to hold back some of the discoveries and the pops and the magic of these afterworld, land of the living duality all the time.
Yeah, that is what to include for the sequel. That's a definite problem. Yeah. So what are the challenges of writing young adult fiction, especially darker YA?
This was wonderful. I was inspired by a number of books and movies, with really universal appeal. So it's really universal readers of, one could say, modern myth, in accessible language. I've the story has a GoPro on Chelsea's shoulder. Much of the novel, she's 13. At the start, she's 5. Her father Thomas also has a GoPro on his shoulder. The figure with the hoodie and the eye patch with his real name. He also has a lot of me time in the story, and he's part-time narrator. I've got a traditional narrator, and that figure also sometimes talks to us. So I must say my work as a leadership and culture architect, my youngest client is 11, my oldest client is 71. So I just love where characters are making major moves. I'm your guy. So that also comes through in the story. It is Chelsea centric, however, not I want to say not isolating to Chelsea. So the challenge for me was to let Chelsea shine or come out of the paint bath as the lead character, where I love these other characters so much, even though many of them are support characters, to let them play the support role, but also not too much lower down. So I think that was a great challenge for me in terms of saying why enough. And there's also another 13-year-old in the story, which joins Chelsea later in the story, to maybe amplify that I want to say YA centric focus of the story, however, still very much universal with, I want to say, with the mic, giving the mic to all these characters from ancient to baby.
Okay, so is there a component of writing that's tricky for you in general?
What's tricky for me in general is to, and this was I wonder how my writing is going to be from here on. This novel has been, I've written before. It's been autobiographical, which became biographical fiction, some poetry and so on. So it's been dense. It's been, emotionally, this is also an emotional story. Maybe it's to ground the emotionality that I always bring, to just ground it in practical adventure and fun and movement, and to transcend the wallowing, in certain depth scenes, particularly from an emotional point of view, because that's also been my own life trajectory, is to say, okay, life does hit us hard sometimes, and may we go through it, may we take the lessons and learn and get the resilience, from walking through it, but then, wake up another day and take a step forward. So I would say it's keeping the story moving. That's been a major transition. Early on, I had a story mentor, which is a brother from another mother as well. And he said to me, why don't you shake the manuscript until about 20,000 words drop out? and that was just, oh, wow, of course. And just to say, allow the reader to come and sit at my coffee table and take the partnership role. Allow the reader's imagination to co-create. And I think this is something I worked really hard at through this novel. So that's been hard for me. However, where I am now, I've got that creative critical integration to say, don't write this sentence to keep a reader out. Write this sentence to invite the reader in and activate the theater of their mind.
Yeah, that's good advice. So, what's the hardest obstacle you had to overcome in your writing life?
Thus far, it's been, getting the rhythm, because my surname is Schmidt, and that's a smith, and that's someone who takes a sword and puts it in the fire and clang, 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 and tss, in the water and in the fire, and it's amazing how my life, I'm also like that. And so to find the rhythm, that the story has, the the genesis of the story is about 2012, 2013. That original game with my daughter, the children's play happened. Many other things happened. First album, first novella, poetry, and I had to put enough food on the table during the time. So when I said, oh wow, this is something bigger, and it was 2020 when this started. So roughly 6 years, 5.5 years, to find the rhythm, to say a working rhythm where I can be as focused as a Smith, as a Schmidt is, in just saying, I've got the shape of this. All I need to do now is, the smithing. So that was the great obstacle, and I must say the great breakthrough for me was to find out. You said 11 a.m. is early for you. To find out that I'm actually not a night owl. I used to believe I was a night owl, but then I said, but what if I go to bed, wait for it, between 8 and 9:30, and let the birds wake me? I don't even wake up with alarm anymore. The birds wake me 4:30, and then I rush to my chores and then to my man cave where I am now. And I think that was a great breakthrough in just having the 3.5 hours before the day would start and the working day, to get that rhythm. So that was the great obstacle. However, I must say I did strike that rhythm sufficiently to get the novel to where it is now.
Yeah, I know a few authors who are like that as well. That is definitely not me. I am not a morning person.
Well, to just to show you that I also wrote the novel for you, Anita, is there's also an owl which plays in the death ritual. There's obviously the previously called Grim Reaper with Raven and Scythe, but there's also always an owl accompanying them to the scene of someone's passing. So for the night owls among us, I also put the owl in. So.
Okay, so what's your favorite aspect of being a writer?
Oh my word! It's to write firstly the world, the architecture of the world, and then developing these characters. I told one of my leadership and culture coaching or architecture clients the other day, I see myself as a student of human personality. So when and I mean you just have in the writing, you just have all the freedom in the world, and I've been schooled in analyzing, assessing, and helping develop human personality. So it's to get these personalities to find the conflicts and the inciting events in this world, in this architecture. My goodness, it's the for me it asks all my talents. Um, and it's even my music talents. I mean, as I progressed through the novel, I realized, okay, my prologue is becoming a song, and the major characters in the book are also getting songs. So it's really a medium that asks all of me. Every aspect that I've discovered the last 2 decades or so, of my own creative capacities, it asks all of it. And what a joy! So full throttle, Werner.
That's lovely. So, who are some of your favorite authors, and is there anything special on your to-read list this year?
Sure. At the moment, I'm so snowed under with translation to my mother tongue. My apologies. Translation to my mother tongue, Afrikaans, which is a derivative of Dutch, the audiobook. So for the moment, I'm immersed in this first. It's like, and I love stepping into all the new facets. Like I said, the soundtrack, the songs. So on the creative side, that asks so much of me that on my to read list, I must confess, I'm looking forward to reading reviews and messages from readers. Favorite authors, my goodness, too many to mention. However, there's a golden thread of authors, and from from Shakespeare, cliche, Shakespeare, but just to whether Shakespeare was a collective of aristocratic individuals or one person, I don't care. But that level of imagination so long ago, my goodness, mythology, the Greeks, North mythology. I'm a great Joseph Campbell fan, so I use him to focus me on interesting stories from mythologies from all cultures. It's these original stories, which are the stories we actually retelling again, but in new forms. So I'm a great fan of the original mythologies of, and this crosses, the major religions, the major philosophies, the major cultures of the world. Where there's a story that pops, I'm there. So I'm a great fan of that. Yeah, and it's more. I'm more a fan of certain works of art. So, for instance, if you think the Graveyard Book was a great inspiration for this book, Corpse Bride the movie. There was also The Book Thief, a new spin on Second World War, where death was a narrator, which is also, so I've got these fragments of multimedia inspiration. But I must say, for me, any writer, and this sounds once again so cliche, any writer that's not too, I mean, we ground people in where we are sufficiently, but then we let the character and the plot and the adventure and the danger and the movement pull us forward. So I'd rather, I would want to say, I'd rather ground somebody in a well-known archetypal space, like a graveyard with a chapel and a gargoyle on the chapel corner, as on the Graveyard on the Hill. And then we create a labyrinth, and in the labyrinth, all these interesting stories and magical things happen. So that's more the flavor of any kind of storytelling, movie, audio, and text wise, that I love. Does that give you some kind of answer to work with?
Yeah, some of the stuff you mentioned, some of my favorite too, like The Book Thief is an amazing book. Love The Corpse Bride. So yeah. So tell us a little bit about some of the other projects and books you've written.
Previous books. The first book was it was originally called Confessions of an Alcoholic's Son, and there's an apostrophe S. So it was my coming to grips with my growing up years. It's a processing of trauma years, and then I realized that one's family can become really, really venomous when you come out with a book like that. So then I made it $75, and I made it fiction. Still based on the original story, and that was a wonderful catalyst for me to say, okay, that's how I came to grips with the trauma that had befallen me, and that echoed in Chelsea's story, where a story she had made also became a catalyst for her. That then after that, and it did very well. I wish I had asked money for it. I gave it away for free, and I didn't ask people's email addresses, but my internet statistics showed just over 8,000 people downloaded it. So quite a lot of people, I think, got some use from that, and I got wonderful feedback. Secondly, I went into singer-songwriting and poetry. I call it a poetry phase. 2 volumes of poetry, also quite. I try to write plain speech poetry, not obscure stuff, like going back to the beginning of things, sitting on a bench with a flash of freshly brewed dark brew, and just watching the Big Bang happen. That kind of thing, So it's just expressing the imagination that I've always had about the major philosophical and cultural things I've come across. That was my first 2 volumes of poetry. First album came out 2018, 19, 20. the story of Adam and Eve, so man and his what if questions. That was wonderful to share with. I call it slow release, small audiences, bespoke minstrel size audiences, often amplified. And I'm currently busy with my second album as well, although it's a bit on the back shelf. One more song to record. It's called Songs from My Morning Walk, which has inspired a lot of the songs on that album. But I must say they are playing second fiddle, or in my case, second baritone ukulele, which is my go-to instrument. While I feel Chelsea is taking over, I wanna hop on the Chelsea boat now and see what the audience thinks, what the readership thinks of book number one. And wouldn't it be a blessing to get the yes, write book number two?
Yeah, okay, and speaking of that, so what is your next project and what can readers expect from you in the future?
Well, it's like saying, if you like Chelsea, give me a thumbs up, give me a review on the platform that you downloaded it on, because I'm raring to go with book two. I can't wait for Chelsea, after coming to grips with her tragedy that had befallen her family, and becoming heroic, that assertive enough space, that beautifully, it's I want to say that calculated risk taker, which is such a healthy theme for a teenager to have mastered. So I'm raring to go with book two and book three. So not to put any pressure on any reader. However, I would love to stay in this world for two more books at least. And so let's see what the market thinks about that, Anita.
Yeah, well, I hope the market loves the book, and you heard it here, readers. You want more? Yeah, yeah, make it known. So I think we'll wrap the interview up on that note. I'd like to thank you for being a guest today. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you for hosting me, and please enjoy the rest of your relatively early morning.
Yeah. Okay, and that's it for this interview. And bye for now, everybody.